Good afternoon, everyone. It is Sunday, June the 14th, 2020. It is currently 3:58 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church, located here in Ovalo, Texas. Now, I came out to the church, obviously, in 2 hours. I need to be standing behind the pulpit instead of sitting back here at this table in the sanctuary. I need to go stand behind the pulpit, and I need to preach the Sunday evening sermon. But until then, I'm here at the church. And well, if I'm here at the church and I have my microphone and I have the laptop, I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm going to hit the red go live button, and I'm going to talk about something, because there's always so much to talk about. And there really is so little time. And not that there's so little time for me. I can make the time to talk, hours upon hours a day, but I know there's only so many hours in your day. So I always have to try to regulate, how many things should I record? Am I recording too much? But then I start thinking about it. You know what? Maybe I am recording too much, but I want to record, so I'm just going to do what I want to do, and hopefully somewhere out there, there's someone who will find whatever I do record and hopefully will benefit from it greatly. I think we have the next, probably for the next hour, you may want to, grab a seatbelt and buckle in, because this is going to be a pretty wild ride. We're going to hear some things that I don't necessarily agree with, but it brings up some issues that I think all Christians need to stop and think about. All right. So let me try to introduce this. We live in a world, and obviously you know this and I know this, that technology is advancing at a very rapid pace. We can all agree to that. And as technology advances, we get advancements in medicine. We get the ability to do different things. And a lot of times where there is great advancement, whether it's technology, and technology and medicine, it doesn't matter where the advancements happen, they always tend to raise ethical questions. And Christians have always been faced with ethical questions. It doesn't matter what year it is, any time in history, things are happening in the culture. Advancements are happening in the culture. Changes are happening in the culture. And the church always has to stop and go, okay, wait a minute. What is the biblical response to this subject? What is the biblical response to this subject? Now, sometimes the church takes a very strong stance, and then later on, the church begins to change and begins to accept that which it once stood very strong against. And we can see this in big issues and small issues. It doesn't matter. This is just a constant struggle and a constant issue that Christians have to struggle with. So in our culture today, we know we have a lot of things happening in regards to, how can we say it, genetic engineering. The desire to manipulate the genetic code inside you and I, right? To manipulate it, but supposedly for good. So let me just throw out some issues, all right? For example, plastic surgery. Is it wrong for a Christian to want to do something to maybe fix their nose, fix their ear, maybe get some Botox injections to try to get away from some wrinkles? What about as a man? I see the advertisement all the time. What is it, the hair replacement surgery? I don't know what it's called, where I guess they take hair from like the back of your head and then they can surgically, implant it at the top of your head or wherever you're losing your hair, and then it's your own hair. But it's somewhat of doing something to alter your looks. Is that ethical or is that unethical for a Christian to engage in such activity? Okay, how far can you go to change your appearance so that you look younger and you like the way you look? Is there something wrong about that? Some will say there's nothing wrong with that. Others may question it. Can you get a tattoo? You're altering your body. Can you do that? Some will try to find some verse in the Bible. Some will say, well, no, that's not what that's referring to. It's referring to something else. Can you do that? So you got plastic surgery. Now, what about, let's throw this concept out there. What if you're going to have a baby and they came to you and said, now look, we can genetically modify the baby so that your baby will be born and it will not have, it won't have this issue and it won't have this issue. And we can ensure that it won't catch this disease. And we can kind of engineer your baby so that it's going to be healthy. It's going to be stronger. It may be smarter. We're going to, step in and modify it. Is that ethical or is that unethical? There's all these issues that are happening. Is it wrong to clone a human being? Is that right or is that wrong? There's so many issues when it comes to certain research, stem cell research, and what most would say embryonic stem cell research. That's a no-no, but stem cell research, that's a good thing. Genetically modified food. Do you want them to genetically modify the food so that it can produce more and that it could be healthier? Where do you draw that line? And let's just be honest. Sometimes it's very difficult to know where the line is and how to draw it and when it's right and when is it wrong, because sometimes we will say one thing is wrong and then turn right back around and justify something else or accept something else. And someone will be like, wait a minute, aren't those are kind of related. So when it comes to genetic manipulation, genetic research, designer babies, designer food, how much are you willing to accept when it comes to the genetic re-engineering or the genetic engineering of a better person, of better people, of genetically modifying your body so that you look younger? Maybe are you willing for them to genetically enter into your brain to remove bad memories? Is that a good thing? How much are you willing to accept? And there has been lots of discussion here, and everyone seems to have an opinion. Everyone seems to have some thoughts. I've got a number of quotes from more from the Catholic Church, and a lot of they've really spoken to a lot of these issues, and we may get into that. But this is what I want to do. This afternoon, when I left Victory Baptist Church, I got in my car, as I always do, and I turned on 91.3 FM, the American Family Radio affiliate here in the Abilene, Texas area. And there's a program called Understanding the Times. Now, this Understanding the Times is a Bible prophecy program. They hold to a very specific form of eschatology, a premillennial, pre-trib rapture, very dispensational in their eschatology. They bring up lots of interesting topics. I've mentioned them numerous times. I try to listen to them on a pretty regular basis. I don't always agree. Sometimes I feel they slide over into kind of conspiratorial thinking, but here's the situation. I got in the car and they were talking all about genetic engineering and the coming genetic apocalypse coming to America. And I was like, well, wait a minute. This raises some questions. Even if I don't agree with them, it does raise issues. So we're going to take some of these issues and we're going to listen to what they had to say. And we're going to stop at different times and go, okay, how should we look at this? And I think what's going to be interesting is when it comes to a lot of these questions, do you remember our discussion about the regulative and normative principle? Are we regulated that we can only do what is specifically commanded in Scripture, or we have a specific example in Scripture that all of our actions, the things we do as Christians, we're very regulated. If the Bible doesn't say do it, if the Bible doesn't give me an example of doing it, then I am not to engage in it. Well, again, trying to be consistent in that principle, it's very difficult. The normative principle says I can do anything I want up to the point the Scripture has a very specific prohibition against it. Unless the Bible specifically calls it a sin, I'm free to engage in the activity. I'm free to do that. So what are we allowed to do? What are we not allowed to do? How far can we manipulate? How far are we willing to support genetic engineering and genetic research? If a man and a woman cannot get pregnant through natural means, is it biblically approved? Is it biblically acceptable for them to use other ways in order for the woman to become pregnant? How far? What are you willing to accept there? Should they just say, well, we cannot get pregnant through natural means, so we're going to adopt? Or should they use all the medical advancements available to them so that the woman can have a child? What's acceptable? What's not acceptable? And in many churches, we never really stop to question these things. We never really stop to come up with a theology of ethics or a theologically based ethical system that deals with all kinds of issues related to the culture in which we live. Look, the culture is not going to sit around and wait for the church. The culture is just moving on. They don't care what we think. They don't care what we're doing. They're going to go on. And the church has to stop and go, wait a minute. Hey, guys, we're Christians. All right, we've got this issue. We've got to talk about them. We've got to think about them. Now, sadly, many times those within the church that talk about these issues slide over into the conspiratorial world. So we have to be careful of that, but we need to be addressing these issues. I mean, they're real issues. And there's so many different ones I could name. I feel like I could just try to give an example from every area. But the goal here for this hour is just to jump in and listen to this program. I'm going to jump in. We're going to analyze it. We're going to talk about it. And it'll be interesting. We have sirens. All right. When your church is in the middle of nowhere and you hear that sound, that's probably not a good thing. Most likely what it is, right now here in West Texas, we haven't had rain for a little while, and it doesn't take long. We can go just a week or two without rain and with the heat, and next thing you know, we have grass fires popping up everywhere. I already saw 2 on the way to the church. So hopefully everything is okay. So, all right. Sorry, when you hear the sirens and your church is in the middle of nowhere, you always take notice, okay? So that's what's going on there. So, but what I really want to do is just listen to this program. I did not hear, I got into my car late today. My sermon went a little long, and then we had some good conversations after church. So I didn't get into my car till about 12:45. This radio program starts at 12 p.m. Central Time on American Family Radio. So in other words, they were already they were 45 minutes into the program. So I missed a lot of this. There may be a lot I disagree with, but let me just give you the thesis. The thesis is they're going to bring up issues related to genetic research and genetic engineering, et cetera, et cetera. And what I want to do is for us to consider each issue, and maybe some of them we'll just disregard as wild conspiracy thinking. But if there's any truth to some of these issues, we need to be prepared to how are we going to think about them as Christians? And then here's the issue. If we say, I'm against that, now we have to be consistent and then work that thinking backwards and then look behind us and go, wait a minute, but I accepted this and I accepted that and I accepted that. If I accepted those things, what makes these new things wrong? Here's what we have a tendency to do. Something new comes along, we simply reject it because it's new and we're not used to it, but we're not really rejecting it because of well thought out theological considerations. We're just rejecting it because it's new. Oh, that's crazy. That's of the Antichrist. Yeah, but look at all the other ideas. You accept that this new thing is just a natural progression of the things you already accept. So I really want you to start thinking about that and think about it in that way. We're using this program to really bring up these issues about how we are to think. Not that I necessarily agree with their approach to all of them. All right, are you ready? Here we go. Understanding the Times. This aired today. I think it aired yesterday originally, and then it re-aired today. I always hear the re-airing of the program on Sundays here in the Abilene, Texas area. All right, listen carefully. No books open. If you may want to take some notes on this. This is going to be pretty crazy. So let's think about this carefully, logically, and biblically.
Odds. Period. If you don't like it, get.
I'm going to back that up. It wasn't right at the very beginning, so let's try this again.
There are consequences when mankind tries to be like God.
We are going to become gods. Period. If you don't like it, get off. You don't have to contribute. You don't have to participate. But if you're going to interfere with me becoming God, you're going to have big trouble.
Welcome to Understanding the Times Radio with Jan Markell, brought to you by Olive Tree Ministries. Today, we begin a two-part series with Pastor Billy Crone of Sunrise Bible Church in Las Vegas, Nevada, and founder of Get a Life Media. Man is trying to play God, is trying to create life, and is trying to rid the world of the need for a Savior. There are terrible consequences to that. We consider Pastor Crone's most recent production on this topic, Hybrids, Super Soldiers, and the Coming Genetic Apocalypse. Here is today's programming.
Of course, Jesus makes the loaded statement, right? As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. And of course, the coming he's talking about is not the rapture, it's his second coming at the end of the 7-year tribulation. But Jesus said, I didn't, that how do you know it's getting close to his second coming, his return? Well, go back to the days of Noah. And then when you go back to the Genesis account, and you see that in Genesis 6, there was massive wickedness on the planet at that time. In fact, it was so great that that's what instituted God saying, I've had it. Here comes the flood. I'm judging the whole planet. And the only people that are going to survive out of this is Noah and his family, 8 people, and the animals that are on the ark. That's it. He's going to wipe everything out. Well, why? Well, there's actually more than one wickedness going on in that text that Jesus said was going to repeat when he comes back again. And the wickedness, certainly general wickedness, and it certainly says that God's heart was grieved because even his thoughts were continually wicked. But the other wickedness that frankly is there that some people want to skip over, but you got to deal with it, was also a genetic wickedness, dare I say. And mankind was being hybridized out, hybridization, and that was another element of wickedness. Now, people say, well, that's unfortunate back then, and that's kind of freaky and weird, but people don't realize it's being repeated today. And this is what this whole thing is about. That's why we entitle it not just hybrids and super soldiers that are being hybridized out for military purposes, but the coming genetic apocalypse. Just like there was a genetic apocalypse the first time God judged the planet, it's going to be repeated. And I'm telling you, it's a lot closer than people realize.
Welcome to the program.
Okay, they got off to a very important start. Now, if you don't know what he's referring to Genesis chapter 6. If you've been in church for any length of time, you've heard probably a million sermons on this. There's all kinds of theories, all kinds of different approaches to this. Genesis chapter 6, let me just read this to you. Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God, some believe the sons of God here are angelic beings, right? Some believe they were fallen angelic beings, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, okay, actual human women, and they that were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Some believe this is a genetic hijacking of the human race, and that this was going to destroy the human race, destroy, in a sense, the human seed, and it would so commingle it and mess it up that then obviously Christ could not come to redeem people because the human race would be destroyed through this kind of re-engineering of the human genetic code. It would be this hybrid of a human with an angelic being. That's what some believe is happening there. Others believe there's nothing like that is happening within the text. That is what he's referring to. If the goal of this program was to expound Genesis 6, we will be getting to Genesis chapter 6 at some point in the VBC Bible Institute podcast, where we're working our way through the entire Bible. So you may want to subscribe to that, and then we will spend a considerable amount of time trying to figure out what in the world is going on in Genesis chapter 6. But for this program, he's saying all of these things are happening and that they're going to be here sooner. I want the examples of these genetic hybrid situations that are happening, because I want us to think about each one that he is going to outline that's possibly coming, and then we can go, yeah, as a Christian, I can support that. No, as a Christian, I can't support that. And then ask ourselves if we're being consistent. That's the goal of this program. So I don't want to get sidetracked. I want to stay focused on trying to accomplish what I've set out to do here. All right, so let's continue listening.
So, the days of Noah, they're going to return. Now, that's an interesting concept. It's right out of the Bible, and that could have many applications. As that little soundbite indicated, there's an angle not many are thinking about, and that would be the angle of genetic engineering. We've heard about genetic modification of foods. what happens when the goal is to make it happen to animals and to humans? Much of that technology, it's not just future, it's here now. How about cloning human beings and creating human-animal hybrids? Now, this is just one reason the Bible calls the last days perilous. Mankind is trying to play God, and that has serious consequences. Some of you may remember little sheep Dolly back in the late 1990s. I'm going to refresh your memory with this little clip.
Dolly the sheep was a sensation when she first appeared before the world. A scientific breakthrough, fascinating but also menacing. Dolly was cloned by taking a body cell from sheep A, fusing that cell's DNA with an egg cell with its nucleus removed from sheep B. This fused cell developed into an embryo, which was placed in the uterus of a surrogate mother, sheep C. The resulting lamb, in this case Dolly, is a clone of sheep A. These were Dolly's so-called siblings, identical sisters, all cloned from the same sheep. Professor Kevin Sinclair worked with them and knew Dolly.
It was a step change in our understanding of early development, which ultimately led several years later, in 2006, to the discovery that you can actually induce somatic cells, these are sort of cells that belong to the body, to become embryonic-like cells that has the potential to divide into other cell types.
This was Dolly's greatest legacy, advances in what we call stem cell research. The ultimate, but still elusive goal, is to use cloning technology to create healthy tissues which can be transplanted to heal damaged cells and organs. But back in 1997, Dolly seemed to raise more frightening issues. If we can clone a sheep, many asked, why not a human being? Since then, scientists have cloned more than 20 species, including horses and household pets.
I think where we draw the line is if we're going to use genetic manipulations, we have to be extremely careful, and we have to look for severe disease effects to control for. Because with a lot of these things, it's not just the person you're doing a genetic manipulation on or potentially cloning, but it would affect all the generations ahead.
So Dolly's brave new world has not quite turned out as predicted. A sheep created like none before her, but she could not escape her own mortality. She died in 2003, now stuffed in a Scottish museum.
We are carrying a new product that talks very extensively about this topic, which, by the way, we're going to broaden the topic for the next program or so. We're carrying Pastor Billy Crone's 16 DVD set titled Hybrids, Super Soldiers, and the Coming Genetic Apocalypse. I want to broaden this even more, at least briefly here, because unless you've been somewhere in a cave, you know that America has been in turmoil. Starting in late May and going on well into June, we have seen unparalleled violence, wickedness, all sorts of things going on that are of a, I would say, almost a demonic nature. Now, does this play into the days of Noah as well? Remember, back in those days, it says in the account in Genesis 6 that there was rampant violence and wickedness. Mankind only thought evil continually. As we've watched some scenes play out in recent weeks in America, and frankly other parts of the world too, but heavily Western world, one would almost have to think that some of the rioting going on is perpetrated by mankind whose thoughts are only wicked continually. So we're going to talk about this and more, and I want to welcome back to the program now the familiar voice of Pastor Billy Crone. Billy, welcome back.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, well, jump back in right there. Now, and I've got to ask you a question. When it comes to the cloning of animals, is that right or is that wrong, biblically speaking? Now, some will say, well, we have no command to do that, therefore it's not right. Others will say, well, there's no prohibition against it, so it's not wrong. Well, how do we justify this, or how do we condemn this? And once again, there's more sirens, so I'll give this a second. I apologize for that. I wish I had a professional studio, but I do not. This is podcasting in a very real way. But the real issue here isn't the sirens we hear in the background. The real issue is when it comes to this subject of cloning. Now, they cloned, and one of the legacies from Dolly was ultimately this idea of stem cell research, being able to possibly benefit and heal as a result. If cloning animals lead to medical breakthroughs that could bring about the healing and curing of certain diseases, is that an acceptable thing or is it an unacceptable thing? If you say, hey, I think cloning animals is okay, well, then is cloning human beings okay? Now, typically, I think Christians would jump in here and say, well, wait a minute, there is a difference. The animal is not created in the image of God. However, humans are. So therefore, we are not to clone humans. Okay. So, but if you could clone an animal and then use some of that genetic research, and we learn some, say, genetic principles to possibly help genetically modify human beings so that we could cure a disease, even though we're not cloning the people, we're going to modify their genetic makeup to cure a disease or to prevent a disease. Are you okay for the manipulation and maybe re-engineering of the genetic makeup of a human being? Like, how much are you willing to accept the modification of the genetic makeup of a person in order to prevent a disease or cure a disease? Like, how far is too far? What is the biblical ethics on this? This is something you have to think about and you have to consider, and you have to really try to figure this out. But let's see where they take the conversation.
And it's always great to be on.
Well, where to start after I've kind of painted that picture there? Let's go for a moment here to the science angle. The whole angle is presented by the scientific community as helpful. After all, we can now create our ideal baby. It will improve society. We now can delete bad memories, and we'll explain more of that as we move along. In other words, this is playing God in the science world. It's being portrayed as a good thing, even though, as you bring out, and I think as we're going to emphasize here, it's going to bring about the destruction of the planet again.
Absolutely. And what they do is they're a master of terminology. The elitists, in different ways, they use buzzwords, code words to hide their agendas, because if they're going to come out and say, hey, we're going to radically alter all of humanity in our image, playing God the way that we want them to come out with technology, people would freak out. What they do is they come up with terms like transhumanism, that humans need to use this technology to transcend the limits that we're experiencing and become better. They even use terms like post-human. But they're all basically terms to describe that these people really want to use science and technology right now to alter humanity so that you're no longer human. In fact, many times we have on tape scientists, think tanks, even military experts and military scientists who are behind a lot of this technology. They even repeatedly make this statement, almost tongue-in-cheek, nervously, saying, how far can we push this and there's not going to be any true humans left? It sounds like science fiction. It sounds wild and weird, but it makes sense only when you go back to the Bible. And you go back to what Jesus said in Matthew 24, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. As mentioned at the top of the program, it's not just the general wickedness, which I think we could agree is abounding every single day. It just gets worse and worse. But even the ability to make hybrids out of humanity, that is actually being pushed as a good thing.
Let me ask you, Pastor Billy Crone.
So let me ask you. She's going to ask him. Let me ask you, because I want your thinking. I want you to struggle with these issues. How far can we go in, quote unquote, playing God? What does playing God look like? Like, what can we do? Like, how far can we? That's why I threw out a lot of those issues: plastic surgery, anti-aging cream, removing wrinkles, taking this to keep you healthier. How far can we go? If you ultimately die and they are able to bring you back, resuscitate you, is that playing God? Is that playing God? If you have a disease that at one point in history would have been terminal, but now we have the ability to heal that disease, is that playing God? Like, how far can you go? Like, where is the line when you cross over and you go, well, we went from all of these medical advancements that preserve life, heal life, and prolong life, and make life better, and give us a better quality of life, make us look better, make us feel healthier, give us more strength, keep our youthful vitality, and all of the wonderful things that are out there to try to improve the quality of our life. If we say none of that is playing God, that's just natural advancement, wonderful, we support it. Where is the line? Where is the line that you're like, wait, that crosses it. That's too far. You cannot go there. Who determines where that line is? And is Scripture clear? Does Scripture give us a clear, mark on the ground, a clear line on the ground, like do not cross this, do not enter, do not touch? So I think these are the issues that I don't think we sometimes really think about. Here's the thing. We as Christians have to learn to think about these ethical issues and try to come up with a solid biblical response. And I think that's very important. All right, let's continue.
Beyond the basic fact that man is trying to play God, which is very troubling in itself, what other warnings can you give? Why should Christians be concerned, in other words?
First, the big concern is it literally is going to bring about the destruction of humanity and, frankly, life as we know it. Because what these guys are doing, and it's not coming, Jen, it's already here, and this is what we expose, and it's been going on for quite some time. In fact, people might be engaged in certain behaviors that are actually having adverse physical effects on their own body, and they don't even realize it. For instance, they're not just wanting to radically alter humanity, but all of God's creation. And I'm talking, they want to change all the originals of not just humans, but plants, animals, you name it. Some of these terms we've known for a while, but we haven't been able to put it together, so to speak. For instance, you mentioned like genetically modified foods, GMOs. And people say, well, yeah, what's up with that? I keep hearing about that. Well, basically, they're genetically modifying our food source, plants, animals, you name it. And we go into great detail. The problem is what happens to the human who ingests those things. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we did on our documentary to add legitimacy to it, because it's such a wild topic, is we brought in an actual geneticist, a Christian who's in this field, who even has patents for genetic technology. They came on and basically said, this is really going on. I know it might sound like science fiction, but she shared repeatedly her concerns that this is being done without regulation across the planet. Yeah. There is no controls on this. In fact, she's saying it's spiraling out of control. She's saying it is going to radically forever alter humanity, plants, and animals, all of God's creation. Many things, after going down this rabbit trail myself with the research, we know as Christians that Jesus Christ is coming back. He's very clear about that. But after going through this, I'm going, no wonder he's coming back. Not only his wrath, but he has to come back, because if these people have their way, just like it was in the days of Noah, just like the scientists today are actually saying, there aren't going to be any true humans left. And not only no true humans, but no true animals or even plants.
Let's stop there. What I want to do, and I'm going to be playing some clips, quite a few in fact, and they're all from your presentation titled Hybrids, Super Soldiers, and the Coming Genetic Apocalypse. And I want to introduce the concept of a chimera, but then I want to follow that up with the concept of CRISPR. And folks, we'll explain all of this. And if you aren't the brightest bulb in science, I'm one of those, okay? I avoided science. Every opportunity I had, I avoided science because it's not my strength. We're going to try to keep it simple so that you can understand some of these concepts and what's going on without the deep scientific jargon. This introduces the concept of the chimera, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Our relationship with animals is really, really complicated. Some animals we keep as pets and companions, and some we eat. Some try to eat us. We drink their bodily fluids. We mix their bodily fluids with bacteria and then let it ferment. Then we eat it with their meat, or their reproductive cells. We grind up their bones and put it into lipstick and makeup. We use their skin for our hats and jackets and shoes and bondage gear and sporting goods and fancy chairs. And of course, we mix our cells into their embryos to create chimeras that will grow new human body parts for transplantation. That last one's new. Whether you realize it or not, we're in the middle of a medical crisis. In the U.S. today, roughly 115,000 people are waiting for an organ transplant. 22 people die every day, waiting for an organ that never comes. But these are just numbers. Let's talk about a person.
When I was 14, my parents took me to a physician, a specialist, and he says the chances are that people with the disease you have are going to have a very short life. Crohn's disease patients generally tend to live until they're 20 or 21 at the best. He suggested that if there was anything I wanted to do in my life, I better get it done as quick as possible.
This is my dad. He's not 20 or 21, in case you're wondering. And that would be weird, even for this show. His life has been extended time after time as medical technology has continued to improve. About 4.5 years ago, though, it looked like time was running out. Dad had been on the kidney transplant list for several years, and one day he finally accepted that he might never get one.
I felt I was going to survive much longer. Well, it wasn't 10 minutes later. We got a phone call asking us to come to a transplant center, and I received from that center a very good kidney, a perfect match.
And now there's a good chance that Dad might need another kidney. And we're all asking ourselves if he can last another 5 years on a waiting list, when the previous wait almost killed him.
We believe that the pig is the perfect model to solve the human organ shortage problem.
Hey lady, I'm trying to talk about my dad. What does this have to do with pigs?
If 22 people are waiting every day for an organ transplant, we have the ability to use the pig to grow human cells, tissues, and organs. Why wouldn't we give the gift of life to people that are waiting in need?
Oh, well, next time lead with that. This is Tammy Lee Stanek, the CEO of Recombinetics. Tammy and the other folks here are working to develop a way to grow transplant organs for humans in genetically modified pigs. Naturally. Or unnaturally. Not these pigs. These pigs are just delicious breakfast pigs. These are the genetically modified life-saving pigs. And one day soon, pigs like these will have their genome altered and human stem cells inserted into their embryos to create what's known as a chimera.
Chimera.
This is Adrienne Watson. She's a scientist.
I'm the Senior Director of Preclinical Development here at Recombinetics.
Like I said, scientist.
When we talk about chimeras, we're talking about an organism that's got cells from two different types of organisms. So our pig chimeras, for example, are mainly composed of pig cells, but the organ of interest would be composed of human cells. That's called a chimera.
Okay then, chimera.
Ultimately, we'd like to grow whole organs, livers, kidneys, hearts, corneas.
This is Mitchell Abramson, Chief Commercial and Scientific Officer at Recombinetics.
By providing an alternative method or alternative approach for generating these human tissues, cells, and products today, we really do open the door to some solutions that currently don't exist due to limited supply of available human tissues.
We already have the ability to grow human cells, including blood tissues. We can grow hepatocytes, which are liver cells, pancreatic cells to cure diabetes or to prevent or delay diabetes.
The first step in creating these chimeras that are definitely not man pigs.
Not a man pig. Chimera.
I get it. Chimera.
Yep.
Is to take an embryo and knock out the genes that would normally grow the organ you're looking to replace. Say, a liver. Get out of here, liver genes.
That embryo is then injected with human cells, and those human cells then fill the niche where the pig cells can't. So if the pig embryo is knocked out for a gene necessary for the liver to develop, now the human cells will go in and actually develop the liver in the pig.
Boom. You got a liver. A liver made out of human cells with your DNA. A perfect transplant organ made just for you that won't require you to take a lifetime of anti-rejection and immunosuppressant medications.
The idea of growing a human organ in a pig is something that probably catches people off guard. But if you're one of those people who need a heart, or if you've got a child who needs a liver transplant or a pancreas, if you've got a child who's got some really serious disease, you're looking for solutions.
These pigs are superheroes because they're saving human lives.
Let's not be too terribly glib about this. There's a ton of ethical questions that arise from this idea of mixing our cells with animals. We're toying around at the fuzzy edges of what actually separates us from the animals we've gotten so creative in utilizing. But we will do it.
You may be wondering, but you're listening to Understanding the Times Radio. Jan Markell here. I have on the line Pastor Billy Crone.
All right, a chimera. What? Whoa, there's a lot going on there. Now, I want you can look all of this up. You can verify all of this, but this stuff has been talked about for, it seems like forever. To be fair, a lot of the very early people who started talking about a lot of this stuff was sometimes viewed as crazy, but this is becoming more and more common. Hey, let's take a pig and let's grow a human organ and then harvest that organ to save that human being. And you don't have to take all of those, that medication to keep you from rejecting the organ, because basically it's using part of your DNA mixed with the animal, and then you create this organ, and then it becomes yours, and it saves lives. So is that crossing the line? Is that crossing the line? Is that playing God? Some people say that's playing God, but was the transplant of organs from one human being to another human being. Was that playing God? Was that too far? Hey, I need a liver. Well, here's someone died and they left their liver. And so now they're going to harvest it from that person. They're going to put it in me and then I can survive. Was that right or was that wrong? Well, many will believe that line was okay and that line was acceptable. And there's many Christians walking around or in churches that survived because they did have an organ transplant and it saved their lives. Okay, well, all right. Well, there's a shortage. Okay, well, how can we fix the shortage? Let's grow organs, and we need to harvest this. And so they're going to use a pig to do that. Well, even if they don't use a pig, even if they're able to create and grow an organ inside a lab, is that going too far? Is it because it's inside an animal? Is it because is that the issue? How far do we go, and what are the implications? Remember, there can be a benefit, but what are the long-term consequences? So these are ethical issues that Christians have to think about. At one point, this was just like this is the kind of stuff that would be talked about on, some crazy late night radio program or some weird podcast, and everybody be like, that's crazy stuff. Now it's like, no, I think it's time for now Christians to stop and go, we've got to come up, where's the ethical line? What's the biblical response to all of this? All right, let's see what they have to say about all of this.
Who's just put out an incredible series of DVDs, Hybrid Super Soldiers and the Coming Genetic Apocalypse. We just played a clip about chimeras. Pastor Billy Crone, what did we just hear?
Well, basically what you heard was, whether people realized or not, it's not coming, it's already here, Jan, where these same geneticists are not just wanting to modify plants, animals, now humans, but they actually want to combine, and they already are combining, humans with animals. And, of course, that's where you get the term chimera, which is based out of Greek mythology of this animal that was made up of, like a monster with a lion's head and a goat's body and a serpent's tail and what have you. And as crazy as that sounds, that's what they're doing. If you notice by the clip, of course, they have the rationale. As freaky as it is, they have the rationale why we need to combine humans with animals and vice versa. It's going to supposedly fix the organ donor shortage crisis. And there is one around the world. And they're saying this is the healthy alternative, quote unquote, to what is going on. Because of the shortage, as crazy as this sounds, in China, they are harvesting organs from people. Then there's calls for actually cloning people. And most people don't know that the cloning not only did not stop with Dolly, cloning is actually being done to humans. We document that in South Korea, even here in America. And they say, well, we can get it from these clones. And people, that's just inhumane. We can't do that. So here comes the rationale for the chimera. How about if we take human cells and put them in an animal cell, i.e. a pig in this example? It will not just grow a heart. It will be a human heart custom tailored to that person's genetic makeup, which means they won't even have to take rejection medication. What they don't tell you, Jan, with all this technology is they're already admitting there's horrible side effects. Shocker, because God says don't do this. But they said in this example with chimeras, when you put the human DNA into a pig, they can't control the whole outcome. It may very well grow a human heart and probably will, but it won't stop there. One example they gave is there's a propensity for it to go and create a human brain, and then they even laugh with tongue-in-cheek going, gee, wouldn't that be horrible if we had a human brain inside of a pig?
You raise some of the obvious questions, and again, it's
now, and all of this discussion, and again, you can go look it up. If you look up chimera, just so that you know, there's a lengthy, and I'm not saying this is the best source, but it's always the place that you start when you do any Googling. Chimera is spelled Chimera, Chimera. You should look this up, Chimera. And if you put chimera genetics, because you've got chimera mythology and you've got chimera genetics, you want the chimera as it relates to genetics, not to mythology, you will obviously find the Wikipedia article, and it gives you, it talks about animals, all kinds of different things here. It goes plants, viruses, talks about ethics, legislation, the Human Chimera Prohibition Act. There's a lot of discussions here about everything that's happened with it. So again, I just want to use the concept as, where do we draw the line? Is it right or is it wrong? He said he was dogmatic. God said, do not do this. All right, well, did God say, do not do this? Was he clear? Is your only scriptural prohibition against it is your interpretation of Genesis 6 as being a hybrid, that these angelic beings were having relations with the daughters of men and creating and messing up the genetic code? Are you basing it off your interpretation of Genesis 6, or do you have some clear scriptural prohibition against this? That's what we have to discuss. But you should be very familiar with this, and you should look it up. And listen, look for and anything in the Wikipedia article. If they quote a source, go down to the bottom, find the source, and go read the source that they quote. Look for reputable sources, medical journals. Look for actual information. Be factual. Don't just drive down the conspiratorial theory black hole. Look for some scientific information and see what the advances are, what the advancements are, what could be the advancements that are coming. And then you have to think of what are the ethical ramifications, and how do you view it from a biblical and theological perspective? But let's continue to listen.
Very extensive teaching. Is there any kind of oversight with this? Very little. How about, can we regulate this kind of technology? You raise the objection that these scientists are starting with an evolutionary mindset, and that's permeated the scientific community. They reject God. The last thing they are listening to would be biblical warnings to never go down this road. And the whole premise is that humanity made this mistake back in the early parts of Genesis with Nephilim, and all that happened in the Genesis 6 account. Jesus said in Matthew 24 that those days of Noah would come back in the last days. What you're trying to do is indicate how what we're talking about today is the recreation of Genesis 6. Am I right?
All right, before he goes to Genesis 6, let me just talk about the Human Chimera Prohibition Act. All right, they mentioned, is there any regulations on this? And they said there wasn't much. So let me just give you some information. The Human Chimera Prohibition Act, on 11 July 2005, a bill known as the Human Chimera Prohibition Act was introduced into the United States Congress by Senator Samuel Brownback. However, it died in Congress sometime in the next year. The bill was introduced based on the findings that science has progressed to the point where the human and non-human species can be merged to create new forms of life. Let me read that to you again. This was in 2005. We're in 2020, all right? In 2005, a bill known as the Human Chimera Prohibition Act was introduced into the United States Congress by Senator Samuel Brownback. However, it died in Congress sometime in the next year. The bill was introduced based on the findings that science has progressed to the point where the human and non-human species can be merged to create new forms of life. Because of this, serious ethical issues arise as this blurs the line between humans and other animals. And according to the bill, with this blurring of the lines comes a show of disrespect for human dignity. The final claim brought up in the Human Chimera Prohibition Act was that there's an increasing amount of zoonotic diseases. With that being said, the creation of human-animal chimeras can allow these diseases to reach humans. On August the 22nd, 2016, another bill, the Human-Animal Chimera Prohibition Act of 2016, was introduced to the United States House of Representatives. It identifies a chimera as, and it gives all of these ways that it identifies them. You should go read all of them for yourself. The bill prohibits the attempts to create a human-animal chimera, the transfer or attempt to transfer a human embryo into a non-human womb, the transfer or attempt to transfer a non-human embryo into a human womb, and the transport or receive of any purpose of an animal chimera. Penalties for violations of this bill includes fines or imprisonment up to 10 years. The bill was referred to the Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, Homeland Security, and Investigations in October the 11th, 2016. But guess what? The bill died. So currently there is no bill prohibiting this. It doesn't appear, as far as I know, there is no bill prohibiting it as of right now. There seems to have been 2 attempts. So you really should look into this for yourself. And you should look into this because these are ethical questions. Look, the ethical questions you may not be caring about them today, but the time is coming that someone will have to. Christians need to be the ones speaking up and going, hey, I don't know. How do we look at this? But we need to be consistent. If we've been accepting certain things, we got to make sure that we don't all of a sudden become logically inconsistent and at the same time, we want to be very careful because we should want, as much as possible, to support anything that could possibly heal and prolong life. But we don't want to cross ethical lines. All right? And this becomes the struggle and how we have to figure this out. But let's continue to listen to them. Here we go.
Absolutely, and from a scientific point of view, again, as we shared in the Genesis 6 account, there's 2 levels of wickedness going on there that grieve the heart of God for him to pull the trigger and say, that's it, I'm going to judge this whole planet. It was the general wickedness, the heart of man continually wicked. I think we could all agree that's being repeated today. But it's also the other wickedness with the hybridization of humanity. That too is happening. It's not coming, it's happening as well at the same time as this repeat of general wickedness. It's really yet another Bible prophecy sign, albeit a lot of people aren't talking about it, but it's another Bible prophecy sign that the return of Jesus Christ is imminent. You had mentioned, Jan, about regulation. This was the other major concerning thing for me. I'm thinking like, man, this is dangerous, obviously, and it's forbidden by God if you read the Bible. What a concept. This was also verified by the geneticist that we have on tape. We got at least about a 2-hour interview with her, and she admits what we found in our research is correct. There is no regulation with this technology, as wild as this sounds. In fact, we documented that they were calling in their own industry as far back as the 1970s that we better regulate this because their words were, this is more dangerous than nuclear warfare. At least when they developed the atomic bomb, they immediately realized the damage to humanity that could cause, so the government stepped in and says, nobody in the private industry is going to mess with this, we're going to control this. There's nothing when it comes to genetic modification. In fact, what she said was it's growing at such an exponential rate, it is now impossible to go back and regulate this because in order to regulate something like this, you have to have a consensus. She says we can't even get to a consensus because we have so many countries doing this now. It's advancing at such a rate, you can't rope it back in. So basically what's happened is we've let the genie out of the bottle and we can't put it back.
I want to play another clip. And folks, I'm playing a lot of clips. They're all from this presentation. If you're listening on the radio, that's great. But if you'd like to see the clips and you can't get access to the DVDs at this point in time, go to our YouTube channel, Jan Markell Olive Tree Ministries. You can see all these clips. We show them both on our YouTube channel. We show them on our presentation on his channel, hischannel.com. You can actually see these intriguing clips. And again, folks, all of this is presented in such glowing terms. You can have a genetically modified baby. You can manipulate DNA in such a way that you can have a designer baby. Women are going to give birth to genetically modified, perhaps even twins or more. Doesn't this sound appealing? Well, I think some of the aberrations also sounded appealing back in Genesis 6, which is why the comparison is made that we are returning to the days of Noah.
In 2011, scientists created glow-in-the-dark cats. The researchers took a gene from glowing jellyfish and inserted it into the unfertilized eggs of house cats. It was a neat trick, but they had a bigger goal in mind. They also made the cats more likely to be resistant to a feline form of AIDS by, again, manipulating their DNA. So why can't we engineer humans in the same way? Well, we can. Engineer ourselves to be resistant to life-threatening illnesses, that is. In fact, one scientist claims that he's genetically engineered 2 babies using a revolutionary tool called CRISPR. But what exactly is a CRISPR baby anyway? Would you like to be 6 feet tall or never bald? The secret to traits like these lies in the 6 billion letters of your genetic code. And just like that, you can edit the human genome. But while the edits may be quick, Their changes can last for centuries, especially if you're editing the DNA in an embryo. Embryos start out with a single cell that eventually replicates into millions and then trillions more. So if you alter that initial cell first, you're manipulating the ingredients for every cell that follows later in life. And those same altered cells can be passed on from generation to generation. That's one reason why most experiments on human embryos haven't left the lab. That is, except for the work of Dr. He Jiankui. He claims to have used CRISPR to target and knock out the CCR5 gene in human embryos, which is linked to HIV infection. And then he did something that shocked the scientific community. He implanted the embryos into several women, one of whom gave birth to genetically modified twins. Resistance to HIV aside, most scientists say the procedure was too risky. At least 2 studies suggest that edited cells might actually trigger cancer. And another found that CRISPR can accidentally take aim at healthy DNA. So while CRISPR could make us immune to disease, who knows what else we might get on the side.
We'll get into what CRISPR is after I take my midpoint break. But Pastor Billy Crone, if you'd like to comment on what folks just heard, go ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like science fiction. Kind of in a nutshell, CRISPR is a technology that was developed back in 2012, and it literally allows the geneticist to slice and dice the DNA. They can take out an individual strand, put it back together, or they could take out a strand and put another strand of something else in it, including from animals and plants. Basically, it was a technology that gave mankind the ability, unfortunately, to alter on a massive scale anything they want, plants, animals, and humans. As you heard, they're already doing it on people, including babies. What they're not telling you is there's horrible side effects. We can get into those maybe later. It's the danger. Now, it shouldn't surprise us because God forbids this kind of behavior. Right. But why is it happening? It's not by chance, folks. This is another Bible prophecy sign from God. As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be the coming Son of Man. Even the hybridization of God's creation is happening again.
You can learn a lot more at getalifemedia.com, getalifemedia.com. Let me just say quickly that we're carrying this product. It's a 16 DVD set, Hybrids, Super Soldiers, and the Coming Genetic Apocalypse. Pastor Crone, how many teachings actually?
32 hours total.
32 hours on 16 DVDs. Find it in my store, olivetreeviews.org. Views as in viewpoint. Give my office a call. Find it in my print and e-newsletter. When I get back, I want to talk about another angle of the days of Noah going on. We've seen it going on in late May and early June here in this incredible year of 2020. Who would have thought in January 2020 would spin out of control like it has? But that is this increase of violence, lawlessness, anarchy that we have seen. And doesn't that remind you of the days of Noah as well, where they only thought evil continually? They only thought about wickedness and violence and anarchy. More on that in just a moment. Don't go away.
We love friendly feedback. Write to us through our website, olivetreeviews.org. That's olivetreeviews.org. Call us Central Time at 763-559-4444. That's 763-559-4444. We get our mail when you write to Olive Tree Ministries in Jan Markell, Box 1452, Maple Grove, Minnesota 55311. That's Box 1452, Maple Grove, Minnesota 55311. All gifts are tax deductible. You can find today's featured product in our online store, along with 24 other cutting-edge items. More in a moment with Pastor Billy Crone and Jan Markell. Jesus prophesied that during the tribulation, there would be a return to the days of Noah. Noah's generation saw genetic manipulation, and we are seeing that taking place today, even before the onset of the time of Jacob's trouble or the tribulation. The depth and depravity of such genetic tampering during that dispensation, from which the church is absent, is staggering. Learn more in Pastor Billy Crone's new 16 DVD, 32 teaching set, Hybrids, Super Soldiers, and the Coming Genetic Apocalypse, found in our online store and print magazine. Jen Markell is a featured guest in this extensive presentation. Mankind is trying to recreate all life forms on our planet today, including recreating humans, but not in the image of God. This is indeed a genetic apocalypse. This is one study you can't afford to ignore if you want to understand the times and be watchmen on the wall. Visit our online store at olivetreeviews.org. That's olivetreeviews.org. Or call us Central Time at 763-559-4444. That's 763-559-4444.
If you create a crisis, you can manage the outcome. You also have to instill a constant state of fear in people. Why? Because people are more apt to surrender their freedoms in a time of fear than in peace. That worked real well for quite some time with this virus, and they got to advance their agenda. Well, it started to wind down. What are we going to do now? Well, you got to whoop up something else.
We don't present information such as today's programming to scare you, but to prepare you to fight an end-time battle for truth and for biblical values as society tries to tear down God and His image in these last days. Here is Jan Markell and Pastor Billy Crone of Sunrise Bible Church in Las Vegas to wrap up today's programming.
And just so that you know, if you are interested in that DVD set, Hybrids, Super Soldiers, and the Coming Genetic Apocalypse. Now, again, I'm not saying I agree with everything in it, but I'm using their program to analyze it and to kind of use it to spark this thinking around some of these issues. There may be some eschatology ways that they handle it and some conspiratorial thinking that maybe I'm not 100% on board with, but they're raising some very important ethical questions that every Christian needs to stop and think, hey, where are we headed with all of the genetic engineering, and where are Christians going to draw the line? We need to start thinking about these things. Just so that you know, the DVD set, it's a 16-part DVD set. They are selling it for $55. Now, you know how I feel when ministries do that. I'm not a big fan of it, but 16 DVDs for $55, I don't know, probably relatively reasonable, I would think. I don't know the quality of the DVDs or anything. But it's if you go to olivetreeviews.org, olivetreeviews is all one word, olivetreeviews.org, and then go to the store. It's pretty easy to find. If you need me to find the link for you, if you're interested, just email me at newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. What I will try to do is get a link to this DVD series, and I will post it at the theologycentral.net blog. Theology Central, all run together, theologycentral.net. theologycentral.net, and I will I'll be more than happy to put it there so that people can see it if they're interested in it. It is weird to me in 2020 to have a DVD set. I don't even have a DVD player. I mean, those days have kind of come and gone for me. So even if I wanted it, I couldn't even order it. I don't have a DVD. I mean, who has a DVD player anymore? I stream everything. Yeah, I mean, and ultra high def 4K, like okay. All right. But if you have a DVD player still, there you have it. You may want to look into it. So just so that you are aware, I just wanted to make that known. So, I know we're over an hour, but we're just going to keep going and try to finish this up. And this will be an extra long special Sunday after. I mean, it's Sunday afternoon. I don't know what you're doing. I've got church in an hour. So let's just finish this because it is raising lots of interesting questions and ethical questions. And hopefully you're enjoying this. Here we go. Let's finish it.
Many may consider lighthearted, but others find very controversial as well. Barbara Streisand revealed in an interview with Variety that her two new puppies are actually clones of her dog Samantha, who passed away in 2017. Before Samantha passed, Barbara had cells taken from the dog's mouth and stomach for replicating purposes. Streisand said, they have different personalities. I'm waiting for them to get older so I can see if they have her, Samantha's, brown eyes and seriousness. The dogs are named Miss Violet and Miss Scarlet.
It's a little creepy, I think. And I don't know, as a parent, I'm sitting here thinking, there's this process that you go through with your kids when their pet dies, of teaching them about death and cherishing relationships and memories and moving on. And I don't know, what do we teach our kids? Well, if Miss Piggy dies or Fido dies, we'll just make another one. So,
this technology's there. It's her right. She can afford it. It's her decision. It's her thing.
It is her thing. Are there any legal ramifications of this potentially?
It deals with really tough ethical issues. You can clone a dog. That means you can clone a human being.
Yes. Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised if next season we're on the stage talking about someone who wants to clone.
Instead of being frozen, well, just clone them. And then just bring them back now.
And then is it the good people that get cloned, just the rich people, who
honestly, I will be so ethically challenged, I'm just going to shut it down. That's when I'm officially going out into the woods somewhere, finding a cabin.
To be continued.
I'll adopt 2 dogs and we'll just do our thing.
And when they die, you'll let them just be dead, right?
Well, it is an intriguing topic. Is mankind playing God? I kind of think so. And that has serious consequences. And it had consequences back in Genesis 6, days of Noah. Why don't you sign up for my various newsletters, print and e, where we talk about these topics, also offer some of the products in the print and e newsletter. We're very active on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You can find us also at hischannel.com, and lightsource.com. Let me just quickly move into some more aspects of what we want to talk about this hour. And I indicated going out of the first segment that I wanted to reference some of the lawlessness that we saw late May going into early June. I've not been able to comment until now, and that's because of some programming issues. And by the way, some of my cities got the same program twice in a row, folks. That's not us. We don't ever air the same program 2 weekends in a row. That's a station glitch, which we have no control over whatsoever. So apologies when that does happen, and that did happen here in the last couple of weeks. So I've not been able to adequately comment on the rioting, the general turmoil of our time. And I'm in the heart of it. The rioting that began Memorial Day in Minneapolis, Minnesota, probably some 20 minutes from where I headquarter. It's been a terrible, terrible ordeal. Quite frankly, Minneapolis-St. Paul is now looking like a war zone. Some sections of the Twin Cities are boarded up, burned down, hundreds of businesses destroyed. I'm only speaking of the Twin Cities. This is going on in about 150 locations. That was end of May into early June. Pastor Billy Crone, let me just throw this to you, because we can take this kind of behavior back to Genesis as well, the days of Noah. If you read the text there, we see that violence was at play continually. Evil was being thought about continually. My hunch is anarchy was being thought about continually. They probably just didn't have some of the technology and more modern issues that we are dealing with today as it concerns the spread of their ideology of evil, wickedness, lawlessness, and anarchy.
The Genesis 6 account, Jan, mentions a precursor from Jesus, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming Son of Man. How do you know it's getting close to Jesus' return? When you see a repeat of Noah's day. And the two wickedness that are mentioned there, primarily we've been dealing with the first one mentioned, and that is the hybridization of humanity. But it does mention what we're also seeing in the news constantly, this violent, riotous behavior and the hatred, and not just with the people who are doing these things, Jim, but also the wickedness of the people who are allowing this to happen on purpose. In fact, the Bible warns about what happens when you do this. It's always going to create trouble. Let me give you two passages real quick. Ecclesiastes 8:11, Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, said, "When the sentence for a crime is not quickly carried out, people's hearts are filled with schemes to do wrong." When you don't come down on this behavior quickly, it is going to do nothing but get worse. The people are going to get emboldened and do it more and more. And that's why Solomon also said in Proverbs 21:15, he says on the flip side, when justice is done, it not only brings joy to the righteous, but terror to the evildoers. In other words, they know, man, these people ain't messing around, and it puts a stop to it. This is not even just being done, it's being purposely done. That is a whole other level of wickedness. Why would you purposely want to destroy your society? Why would you purposely want to hurt people physically and just stir up trouble in the country? And again, that's a whole elitist, big brother, globalist issue. That is a level of wickedness that we are seeing that I believe is a repeat of Noah's day.
Yes.
So it's still on topic. The Bible also mentions this kind of behavior in 2 Timothy chapter 3 when Paul says, but mark this, there's going to be terrible times in the last days. And he goes through a whole list there of rotten behaviors. And some of the things he mentions there is people are not just going to be proud and boastful, but abusive and disobedient, ungrateful, unholy, without self-control, brutal. And tell me that's not what's going on as well.
We went from, obviously, the catastrophe of a virus that overtook the whole world, and I've mentioned this on air before, that it affects between 6 and 9 out of 100,000 people, and yet the whole world was shut down over that. But we went from that catastrophe to businesses, catastrophe to people's livelihoods and things they'd worked for all their lives. We moved right from there into entire cities losing blocks and blocks of livelihoods, lifetime worth of work being wiped out in one night of rioting. And you also have to wonder, too, Pastor Billy Crone, and he is my guest for the hour. He'll join me again next week as we talk a little bit more about the hybrids and the super soldiers and the coming genetic apocalypse. You have to wonder, was this orchestrated? I don't know that we know. I mean, you and I talk about how the globalists are trying to establish instability, because with instability they can get their system up and running, which they've been trying to do since Babel. Hasn't been very successful. They will get 7 ignominious years during the tribulation. But I think our point is we see the setting of the stage for the tribulation.
Oh, absolutely. And it's already been demonstrated that the people that are being arrested and have been arrested, they're not even from these actual cities, a lot of them. So that tells you that it's being done on purpose. That's wicked behavior and a repeat of Noah's day. I don't think it's by chance the timing, Jan, as you had mentioned. So here we go through this virus, and if you're a globalist and elitist, and that's a whole other topic, why are they doing this to our country? Why are they trying to install these big brother things, shut down the American economy, make Trump look bad? Well, because their goal is to take over our country, amongst other things. Right when you started to see the rhetoric for the virus to start wind down, what wound up? This righteous behavior. I personally, Jan, don't think that's by chance. Part of it is learning for years myself in research with these globalist behavior is there's.
And now I would warn you here that I know this is super common thinking right now within the Christian world, that all, everything happening from the pandemic to the riots, it's all being planned. You've got the elites, just mysterious elites who is doing all of this and making all of this happen to make Trump look bad. Of course, anything that makes Trump look bad is anti-Christian now for many Christians. That's the way they view it. Which just don't even get me started on that. So this is the kind of conspiratorial thinking that I was warning you about. I'm not a big fan of this. But this got me thinking about the whole ethical issue with genetic engineering and genetic manipulation. Those are the issues I wanted you to think about. But we'll try to let them finish.
Certain things that they rely upon. What they do is the axiom, if you create a crisis, you can manage the outcome. You also have to instill a constant state of fear in people. Why? Because people are more apt to surrender their freedoms in a time of fear than in peace. That worked real well for quite some time with this virus, and they got to advance their agenda. Well, it started to wind down. What are we going to do now? Well, you got to whoop up something else. And then as far as the righteous behavior and all that stuff, another thing that the elitists rely upon, especially here in America, is they have to keep us constantly divided and hating each other. The reason why, Jan, is these elitists, by very definition, the term elite, that means a small number, certainly in comparison to the world's population and even the population in our country. They're afraid of our numbers. They know that we will overwhelm them. And they also are afraid of not just our numbers, but of us ever finding out and our ever coming together as Americans united against them, because we'll put a stop to them lickety-split. So what do? They constantly instill things purposely in our society to keep us divided. They use division to conquer us. And I'm telling you, I think that this is just yet another tactic to advance their agenda and to keep us Americans separated from each other. They want us hating each other. They want us focusing on skin color instead of truth. They don't want us to look at what these globalists are doing, and as long as we're busy over here in a corner fighting and beating each other up, they're laughing.
They also want to elect an ardent liberal in November and take out President Donald Trump. I want to go back to the hybrids, the super soldiers, and the coming genetic apocalypse, because that really is our focus for this week and next. I wanted to insert
I want you to stop there. Make sure you understand they can blame the elites. They can blame that everyone's causing us to be divided. All of those issues arise from the human depravity, the elites. No, you can sit there and blame them all day and that the elites are they're doing all of this to get rid of Trump. Well, Trump's president. So why doesn't he stop it? Why doesn't he expose the conspiracy? Why doesn't he expose the elites? No, the elites are doing this to get rid of Trump, but Trump's not exposing it. When Trump tries to expose something, he usually tweets out some conspiracy theory. All right. So why don't he he's the president of the United States. He has access to everything. Just expose everything. Put it all out there. So yeah, it's just weird. This is the weird conspiratorial thinking that all this is a grand conspiracy. It's all a grand conspiracy to destroy us and to take down Trump, to get a liberal elected. And so we need to fight this by making sure we go vote for a conservative, because a conservative will save us. Well, a conservative's been president, and look at the world. So, yeah, it doesn't work that way. The issue, let me state it again for Christians. We're fighting a spiritual war. It cannot be fought through politics. Politics can't fight it. We need to fight this through presenting the gospel, prayer, fasting, etc., etc., etc. I've said it a million times. I know I sound like a broken record, but when you listen to Christian radio, it always turns into the same talking points and the same conspiratorial thinking. Let's see if they get back to the genetic stuff, because that's the real issue that I think we need to think about here.
A little caveat that we did, because to me it's so obvious. When you start seeing rioting, rebellion, anarchy, lawlessness, by the way, Billy Crone, and he is my guest both this weekend and next weekend, if we think what we've watched is bad, you haven't seen anything yet until you get to the tribulation, from which the church is absent. But this is just a little teaser of what we've been seeing here in the last few weeks.
Absolutely, in a multitude of angles. But if you think people's riotous, ungodly, angry, murderous, brutal behavior is bad now, this is child's play.
Well, it's child's play because the restrainer is still here. The restrainer is gone during the tribulation. So there are no holds barred. Folks, you do not want to be here for the tribulation time, and you will not be here for that if you name the name of Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. I want to move on to CRISPR. I'll play a little clip here that introduces CRISPR. Again, folks, we're trying to keep the science to a level that will keep it simple, and when we come back from this clip, I'll have Pastor Billy Crone elaborate a little bit more just what is CRISPR.
Now to this story, revolutionary technology that can edit genetic mistakes is getting attention and scrutiny this morning. CRISPR could help rid us of diseases like cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy, and even HIV and cancer. Think about that.
And what is CRISPR? First of all, it's an acronym. It stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats, a huge mouthful. You can see why we use the acronym CRISPR.
So I'm sorry, what's CRISPR again? Geneticist Jennifer Doudna gets asked that question a lot. A researcher and professor at UC Berkeley, Doudna has become a spokesperson for a gene editing technology she's credited with developing. That mouthful known as CRISPR.
I've heard it compared to essentially like a film editor, slicing a bit of film.
I would say that's a great analogy.
How does that work then?
Think about a film strip. You see a particular segment of the film that you want to replace. If you had a film splicer, you would go in and literally cut it out and piece it back together, maybe with a new clip. Imagine being able to do that in the genetic code, the code of life. You could go in and snip out a piece and replace it with something that corrects a mutation that would cause disease.
That's incredible.
CRISPR has generated immense excitement because it's fast, cheap, and can cut and paste genetic code with great precision. It used to take months or years to alter a single gene. Now, that can be done in a matter of days.
Could it end cancer?
What I'm excited about there is the potential to use the CRISPR technology to program a patient's immune system to recognize tumor cells in a precise way.
Could it cure at some point virtually any disease?
Any disease that has a genetic basis is something that could be treated using the CRISPR technology.
And imagine, Doudna says we could expect to see clinical applications of CRISPR within the next few years.
This is no longer science fiction.
So this is so exciting.
Yeah.
Tell us what's been done so far in animals, for example.
CRISPR has been used to design plants with useful traits in them, so it's already been used in agriculture. You used it to cure mice of a rare liver disorder caused by a single genetic mutation. Researchers in China have used this to produce super muscled dogs. So we're at the beginning, is sort of the promise of this, right? This is the future of disease, is gene editing.
Pastor Billy Crone, again, being presented as sort of the answer to everything. Obviously, it has a very dark side.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one thing they didn't mention is they've also been already doing it on humans, babies and adults, not just plants and animals. That's a good analogy that they shared about this technology. It's like a film strip. People are familiar with the DNA, and they see it's got all these little strands in it, the genetic code that God designed. So basically, they figured out how they can slice and dice. I could take out this little piece and put it back together and see what happens with that. Or I can take out a piece and I can insert another from some other organism and do that. And let me share with you real quick, Jen, here's what they're saying this is going to provide. And then I'm going to share with why it can't provide. This is one example. They say this is why we need to go down this route and alter humanity and basically repeat the days of Noah. They say you enter a wellness center, and the receptionist greets you, and you say you're here for your annual restoration. Though your real age is 110, you would like to be restored to the age of 20-something. So the nurse injects you with the genome solution through your skin, and now you're, quote, set for another year. And they say this scenario may sound like something out of science fiction, but experts predict that it's coming sooner than later. They go on to say that it will also allow you to destroy any harmful pathogen and repair any faulty DNA. It could correct problems like heart disease and cancer, and it could repair the aging process. It could also strengthen and enhance other parts of the body. It could restore aging bones or muscles or eyesight and teeth to a biologically perfect state. And listen to this. The added capacity would allow a person to run at full speed for 15 minutes without taking a breath. No more huffing and puffing. And they said one day we will say goodbye to aging and hello to forever being young and healthy. And they predict it could appear in clinical trials by the mid-2020s. This is not far off. This is what they're really working towards. Why did I say it's not going to lead there? Because what they're already finding out is that the DNA structure in all of life that God designed is so complex that it's not as simplistic as they're pitching it. They say if we could take the DNA strand out that a person could end up with cancer, then we'll just take it out and they'll never get cancer. Yay! Well, the problem is it's so complex. They're now learning that single strand could have the propensity to produce cancer, but it did 13 other positive things that the human needs for survival, but you just took it out. And by the way, when you take it out, you can't put that strand back in. So you forever altered the human line, and it's irreversible changes. Okay. And basically the geneticist that we interviewed admits that these people, again, there's no regulation with this. They don't even know what they're doing. They're entering into it with this Pollyannish attitude. An analogy that we used in the interview was, can you imagine if you let a chimpanzee try to steer the space shuttle? And that's what these people are doing. They think that they know how to manipulate the DNA. The DNA from God is so complex that they don't know in totality what it does, and they're messing up God's design.
You also get into the...
All right. Now, there's so much there. This is what I'm going to do to end this whole discussion. First, I want to give you just to kind of remind you what my thesis was. My thesis was all of this is happening. All of these developments are occurring, kind of make you aware of them. But I want you to really struggle with the ethical dilemma. What's right? What's wrong? How far can we go? So I want you to just really consider and think about that. And I want you to investigate everything that they're claiming. Look it up. Find reputable sources. Check, double check, triple check. Don't fall down the rabbit hole of conspiratorial thinking. Now, here's what I want to leave you with. This is a very important theological question. How much suffering are we as human beings allowed to try to get rid of and try to avoid before we cross a line that we're really trying to get rid of pain and suffering that may actually be what God has allowed for and decreed for the world to endure? How much suffering can we get rid of? I know as human beings, we want to avoid all suffering. We want to avoid all discomfort. We want to avoid, all of that. And I understand that. And all of the advances in medicine and health has been to try to give us better life, better quality of life, and prolong life, and to avoid those suffering. Preventive medicine is all about that. Do this and do that. You can avoid all of these problems. So we accept this concept all over the place, and we accept that having a surgery to fix this, having a surgery to remove that, having this taken out of the body so that we can live longer and healthy and that we can remove suffering. There's so much of this we accept. But how far can we go, and how much suffering do you think maybe God actually, can we say that there's some suffering God decreed for our life and that it's supposed to be there? And is it wrong for us to try to avoid it? In other words, is all pain and suffering to be avoided, or some pain and suffering to be endured so that we can learn what God may want us to learn through it? Or do we believe that God can give us those lessons without it? Like how do we look at that from a theological standpoint? I know sometimes we're like, God, please fix this. God doesn't fix this. So then we say, well, the pain and the suffering is a part of what God wants me to go through. But if there are medical and technological ways to remove that pain and suffering, then is that right or is that wrong? I think we so desire to remove suffering that I don't know. Like, is there a line that's acceptable in removing pain and suffering and avoiding it? And there's the line where we go too far from a biblical standpoint. Now, Christians have disagreed through this for 2,000 years. I don't know if there's a biblical answer. I don't think the biblical answer is clear as they making it out to be. They're just like, nope, God says no, God says no, God says no, God says no. Because, there's so many things like, hey, if they can do something to get rid of cancer, are you willing to say no to it? Well, I'm saying no to it if it deals with the human genetic makeup. Okay, well then, so what can they do to get rid of cancer that you will agree to? Like, these are ethical questions that we really need to think about. And I don't think there's clear answers. I don't think the answers are clear. Look, the only biblical answers they've tried to give us is over and over Genesis 6, Genesis 6, Genesis 6. They've not outlined a biblical teaching on this. And I just want you to really think about that. If you can outline a biblical teaching and you've got some verses you think are applicable, email them to me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. I'm going to stop right there. I have posted a link to that DVD series that they advertised. It's on the theologycentral.net blog, theologycentral.net. theologycentral.net. Go to the blog section. I put that all together while we were listening. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention on this Sunday afternoon. I thought it was interesting, raises a lot of questions. Hopefully you think it was interesting as well. I'll be back on the air at 6 p.m. under the VBC podcast. So in about 35 minutes, we'll be live on the air for the Sunday evening worship service and Proverbs chapter 1. So you may want to join us for that. All right, everyone, have a great afternoon, a great Sunday evening, and continue to pray for our world. So much is happening. So much is obviously coming in the future. It's going to be harder and harder for Christians to try to figure out how to live and try to follow the scriptures in a world that is moving further and further away from God, and a world that seems at times to be disintegrating and imploding in and on itself. We need Christians who are thinking. We need Christians who are praying. We need Christians who are trying to fulfill the Great Commission. And we need Christians trying to think biblically about what's happening in our world. All right, I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great day. God bless.